No one truly understands how it was accomplished, and what's even more unsettling is that we've spent music 2,000 years trying to unravel that mystery. The Roman Colosseum, a monumental structure that has stood proudly since 72 AD, has defied earthquakes, centuries of pillaging, prolonged abandonment, and even the sheer gravitational pull of its own colossal mass. With 100,000 tons of travertine, 80 arches, and 4 stories of concrete and stone, it continues to baffle modern engineers, who often scratch their heads and quietly confess that they don't quite grasp how such a feat was even possible. They had no hydraulic cranes, no structural steel, no sophisticated computational software, none of the technological advancements we now take for granted when undertaking a project of this immense scale. And yet, there it stands. What I'm about to share with you today isn't the Colosseum found in tourist brochures, nor is it merely a backdrop for Instagram photos, or the iconic monument gracing the back of a €1 coin. This is the true story of how a dedicated group of human beings, using only their hands, their animals, and an organizational brutality that is still difficult to fully comprehend, erected the most ambitious entertainment structure the ancient world had ever witnessed, all in less than 10 years. What you're about to discover in the next few minutes will irrevocably change the way you perceive this magnificent edifice. It all began with a very cold, calculated political maneuver. The year is 68 AD. Nero has just been deposed. The emperor who constructed a palace so disproportionate and obscene in its sheer size that the Romans dubbed it the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, has fallen. Vespasian, the new emperor, acutely understood a fundamental truth that politicians across all eras have always grasped. To truly win over a populace, you must give them something tangible, something grand, something they can see, touch, and feel, something that makes them forget they've just emerged from 4 years of civil war and utter chaos. So, Vespasian decided to build the largest structure ever conceived for mass entertainment on the precise spot where Nero had his private lake, that artificial expanse of water the previous emperor used solely for his own hedonistic pleasure. This new venue would be open to all, often free of charge. It was a political gesture so meticulously calculated, so strategically cynical, that it's almost admirable. But there's a critical question that hovers above this entire political narrative. A question historians have spent centuries deliberately avoiding because the answer is profoundly uncomfortable. Who really built the Colosseum? The official response typically cites brilliant Roman engineers, visionary architects, and unprecedented organization. And while this is true, it's also profoundly incomplete. Because behind every 2 to 3 ton block of travertine, behind every perfectly calibrated arch, behind every cubic meter of Roman concrete, which the Romans themselves called opus cementitium, lies a truth that tourist pamphlets rarely, if ever, dwell upon. That truth is forced labor on a scale almost impossible to imagine. Following the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD, Titus, Vespasian's son, returned to Rome with more than just military glory. He brought back somewhere between 70,000 and 100,000 Jewish prisoners, people, human beings, who in the Roman lexicon were simply transformed into instruments of construction. It was these individuals who dragged the enormous travertine blocks from the quarries of Tivoli, 30 kilometers, about 18.6 miles, outside Rome. It was they who dug the foundations. It was they who bore the literal and physical weight of a building we now visit 2,000 years later, gazing in admiration and taking smiling photos. This doesn't erase our architectural awe. It simply complicates it profoundly. And now we come to the part that truly defies easy explanation. If you want to join this community of individuals seeking the real stories behind history's grandest monuments, then subscribe now because what's coming in the next few minutes is precisely the kind of detail you won't find in any standard history textbook. 30 kilometers. That's the distance between Rome and Tivoli, home to the travertine quarries. Now imagine moving a 3-ton block of limestone. You have no heavy machinery. No tracks. Instead, you have oxen, wooden sleds, rollers, and human bodies pushing. Geologists who have meticulously studied the Colosseum estimate that approximately 2.5 million tons of material were required to erect the entire structure. The travertine alone accounts for an enormous fraction of that colossal figure. The remaining materials music consisted of volcanic tuff, fired brick, and that remarkable Roman concrete, which truly deserves a story all its own, as it is quite literally one of the greatest engineering revolutions of all time. The modern concrete we utilize today has a well-known flaw. It degrades, it cracks. Structural engineers themselves acknowledge that a conventional concrete building typically has a lifespan of only 50 to 100 years before requiring significant intervention. Yet, Roman concrete, 2,000 years later, is in many cases harder than the day it was first mixed. Why? For decades, scientists had no clear answer. Then, in 2017, a team of music researchers from the University of California analyzed samples from the Colosseum and other Roman structures, unearthing something truly unexpected. Roman concrete was crafted using volcanic ash from Mount Vesuvius, seawater, and lime. The unique chemical combination of these three elements meant that when exposed to water over time, instead of weakening, the material continued to crystallize, becoming progressively stronger and more resilient. Time didn't destroy this concrete. It improved it. The Romans, of course, possessed no knowledge of molecular chemistry, nor did they have advanced laboratories. They most likely arrived at this remarkable formula through centuries of arduous trial and error, observing music which constructions endured and which succumbed, constantly learning from the failures of their predecessors. The astonishing result is a technology that we, with all our accumulated knowledge, still haven't managed to replicate with complete satisfaction. This alone should prompt us to reflect profoundly on the crucial difference between raw intelligence and mere information. But the concrete is only one piece of the puzzle. The other part, the one that truly defies comprehension, is the sheer speed of its construction. The Colosseum was erected in approximately 8 years. 8 years to build a structure 50 meters, 164 feet, tall, with an outer circumference of 527 meters, 1,729 feet, boasting a capacity for 50,000 to 80,000 spectators. It featured 80 numbered entrances with crowd flow management systems whose efficiency many modern stadiums still haven't surpassed, and an intricate subterranean network of tunnels, elevators, and trapdoors that allowed animals and gladiators to appear in the arena from beneath the ground, as if materializing like ghosts. How do you organize such an undertaking with the technology available in 70 AD? The answer is that the Romans had developed something that engineering historians now consider just as revolutionary as any of their groundbreaking materials. They had devised a construction management system that would not be seen again in Europe until the 19th century. This involved a meticulous division of labor, team specialization, and simultaneous phased planning. While one team excavated foundations, another prepared the travertine, another mixed concrete, and yet another constructed the arches. They didn't work sequentially. They operated in parallel, much like a modern factory, 2 millennia before factories even existed. And now, this is where things get truly strange. There is something beneath the Colosseum's foundations that no Roman fully music documented, something archaeologists only relatively recently uncovered. Beneath the arena floor, that wooden stage where gladiators once battled, lies an intricate labyrinth, a network of corridors, rooms, and shafts descending at least 2 levels underground, measuring 94 meters, 308 feet, long and 73 meters, 240 feet, wide. It featured a drainage system so ingeniously designed that when modern engineers excavated the area in the 20th century, they found the water channels virtually intact. What was all of this for? Part of the answer is straightforward. The animals, the lions, tigers, rhinoceroses, hippos, that dramatically appeared in the arena needed to be housed somewhere before the spectacle. Specialists estimate that up to 5,000 animals could be used in a single day of games. 5,000 in one day. The implications for logistics, feeding, and transportation from Africa or Asia point to a truly global supply chain operating just to fuel a single stadium. But there's another, more enigmatic and fascinating part of the answer. The Colosseum's basements contain 32 animal cages operated by an elaborate pulley system, allowing multiple trapdoors on the arena floor to open simultaneously. Imagine sitting in the stands and suddenly, without warning, the ground opens up at 8 different points simultaneously, revealing entire scenes or launching gladiators and beasts into action. For a first-century spectator, The distinction between this engineering marvel and pure magic must have been incredibly difficult to ascertain. What comes next is something very few people know about its construction, and it's the detail that most astonished me when I first discovered it. The Romans didn't use architectural blueprints in the modern sense. They lacked large-format paper and the scaling systems architects rely on today. Instead, they employed something called rules of proportion, mathematical principles memorized and passed down from master to apprentice, which dictated how different parts of a structure should relate to one another. If an arch measured a certain dimension, the columns supporting it had to adhere to a specific proportion. If a wall had a particular thickness, the foundations required a corresponding depth. This wasn't mere intuition. It was applied mathematics, executed without the benefit of paper. And there's compelling evidence that these rules were incredibly precise. Archaeologists have measured all 80 arches of the Colosseum and found millimeter-level consistency, a feat difficult to explain even with modern measuring tools. This precision can only be attributed to an extraordinarily sophisticated system for the transmission of knowledge. The Colosseum took 8 years to build, but it took generations to learn how to build it. I'll conclude with what I personally find to be the most disturbing part of this entire story. In 443 AD, an earthquake devastated southern Italy, causing severe damage to numerous structures throughout Rome. The Colosseum sustained damage to its south facade. What archaeologists discovered when studying these damages was profoundly telling. The section that collapsed was the one that had been rebuilt in later eras, using less rigorous techniques than the original. The first-century section, the part constructed by those engineers and those prisoners, withstood 2,000 years, enduring earthquakes, medieval looting where blocks were literally ripped from the building for other constructions, and centuries of abandonment. And that original core still stands. There's a quote an Italian engineer shared in an interview some years ago that has always stayed with me. He said that if we were to build the Colosseum today using modern materials, it probably wouldn't last 2,000 years. It likely wouldn't even last 500. That speaks volumes about what we often label progress. If you've made it this far, it means this kind of history captivates you as much as it does me. Take a look at the other videos on this channel because there's plenty more where this came from. Real history, unembellished, without condescension. Just the unvarnished truth behind the things we think we know, yet have only just begun to truly understand. The Roman Colosseum has stood for 2,000 years, gazing upon Rome, and Rome, in turn, has looked back at it for just as long. There's something in that enduring exchange that we have yet to fully decipher.